All right, creativity and marketing, they go together like peanut butter and jelly, right? If only it were that easy. Because let's face it, when it comes to creativity, there's certain iconic brands that just are the ones that we know who do all of the cool stuff. Let's look at Legos, for example. They sell these simple little plastic blocks. Legos has an amazing website. You can go there and you can order product and have Legos drop shipped to your front doorstep. You can play games, you can play videos, you can create cool things. They have a magazine that shows up in your mailbox every single month. There's kids who just go insane when they know that the Legos magazine is in their mailbox. They've done a Hollywood feature film, grossed hundreds of millions of dollars. They have a brickumentary, a documentary for the adult fans of Legos. They have a YouTube channel that has millions of subscribers. They have video games. They have a TV series. They even have an app. Now, when you think about this as a marketer, so many of these things are just over the top crazy. Because why would we ever have the time? When do we ever have the time and the budget to be able to do all of these kind of projects? So it creates a problem for us because when you hear about great brands like Lego and other brands that are doing amazing content and creating these digital experiences, we start to disconnect. Because we say, you know, that's not what I sell and that's not what I do and I'm never going to be able to do this. If I'm a transportation company, I'm probably not going to do a video series. If I'm a mortician, I'm probably not going to do a TV series. And if I sell ag fertilizer, I'm probably not going to do an app to go in a game to go in the App Store. So what happens is that instead of looking at brands like Lego and using them for amazing inspiration for the creative things that we can do, we start to discount them and we start to make reasons why this would never work for us. My boss would never let me, kind of a bonehead. I don't have the budget. I don't have the time. We never have the ramp-up time to be able to do all the things that we want creatively, right? And so instead of looking at these brands, we start to discount them. And we say, that doesn't apply to us. And this creates a problem for us because what it does is that it stagnates our creativity. And there's something that we have to do about this. But before we can understand what to do, we have to really be able to diagnose our problem and understand what it is that we're dealing with. So I've come to a lot of events like this, and I've sat in the audience and I've listened to people stand up here and talk about all the really cool, amazing things that they've been able to do. And I realize something is that I sit in the audience and I listen to people, I start to disconnect and check out, and I look around at other things that I can do. You know, my phone's always there. And I dug into this about why I started to feel like this, because one day I was listening to somebody from Zappos talk about their approach to customer experience. And as I was paying attention, I was thinking, this would never work in my world because this is online retail shoes, and I typically work with enterprise B2B companies. They're not going to be able to do these sort of things, and they wouldn't want to do these sort of things. They would never agree that this is something that would apply in their world. And I started to do a little self-diagnosis. And then I went to the place where you can find the answer to any medical situation that you've ever had ever, Google. And if you've ever Googled really odd medical conditions and gone through the images, there's a whole lot of things that you can find in there that are really, really disturbing. Luckily, this one isn't this bad. But it's actually a syndrome that we have, and it's called brand detachment disorder. Brand detachment disorder. And it's this tendency that we have to look at the work that comes out of great and inspiring brands and say that's not relevant and that doesn't apply to me because what I sell is different or unique. So that works for them, but it would never work for me. And so we detach from this creativity, and we don't give ourselves a chance to be inspired by it. Now, it's not just something that I have. It's something that everybody has in this room. When you see the Volvo video of Jean-Claude Van Damme doing this split between the two semi-trucks, and you look at that, you start to have brand detachment disorder because you say, I would never be able to hire a B-list actor to do a video for me. I don't have that kind of budget. When we hear about Apple doing their new product launches, and we see the people lining up outside of stores and camping overnight because it's such cool stuff that they do from a marketing perspective, we say, that would never work for me, and we start to detach from this experience. So there's something that we have to do in order to address this syndrome. We can't just sit here and say, yeah, I get that, I agree with it. We actually have to start to take action. And we have to admit that this is a problem that we legitimately have. And we're going to take that first step right now. So I want everybody to stand up. Stand up where you are. So the first step in any multi-step recovery program is that you start to admit that you have a problem. So when I say go, I want you to turn to somebody near you, and I want you to say your name, and I want you to admit to them out loud, I have brand detachment disorder. And then when you're done, I want you to raise your hand. Okay, go. Hi, Gina. Excellent. Okay, raise your hand when you're done. Stay standing. All right, your next step is that you're going to turn to somebody else and you're going to say, I am sick and tired of hearing about, and then fill in the name of the brand you are sick and tired of hearing about, and tell that person I can be as creative as they are. And when you're done, raise your hand. Go. Excellent. Okay, have a seat. Have a seat. I heard some commonalities in the brands that people were talking about. Now it's one thing to have a label for the syndrome and to be able to admit that you have it, but it's another to be able to identify it on a day-to-day basis. So if you happen to be in a meeting and someone mentions Zappos and you do one of those teenager things where you go, roll your eyes and walk away, then you probably have brand attachment disorder. Or if you see that video of Volvo and you hear somebody talking about how great it is, the muscles from Brussels doing the splits on the Volvo truck, and all you can think about is if I could just let the air out of that person's tires and they can't make it to work tomorrow so I don't have to hear it again, then you probably have brand attachment disorder. Or if you have to listen to your boss talk again about how amazing a product launch was from Apple, and all you can think is that you want to reach across the desk and grab them by the neck and strangle them, then you probably have brand attachment disorder. Now, luckily, the solution for this is a non-medical procedure, which makes it kind of easy, something else we can do right here in this room. And it's something called a brand transplant. And a brand transplant is when you take something that you love from an amazingly creative and inspirational brand and you transplant it into the world of your own brand or your own product, whatever it is that you're working on. Now, let me give you an example of a company that's done this really, really well. This is Josh Reeves, and he's the CEO of a company called Zen Payroll. I see some heads nodding like you know them. Zen Payroll is a software system that helps companies deal with their payroll system. And every day when Josh came to work, he said, you know, I really believe that there's a lot that we can do for our employees, but I'm just not sure where to take the company from here. And then one Saturday afternoon, he was laying around sitting on his couch, and he was watching the movie Office Space. And if you've ever seen this movie, it's a movie about horrible bosses who do horrible things and how they treat their employees. And poor Milton, all he wants to do in the whole movie is just get his freaking stapler, right? Stapler, that's all he wants. And as Josh watched this, he realized it's not always that companies intend to treat employees bad. It's that sometimes that's just what happens because of the system. And he looked at how his own company treated their employees and the gusto that the employees had for the product that they sold and how much they cared about their customers and what it is that they wanted to do. And he said it's really gusto that we have for our customers. And they rebranded the company as Gusto, but they also looked at the purpose of what it is they were trying to do to serve their customers. And he said that's what we want to do. So he expanded from just payroll into HR systems. But by being able to do that, he was also able to tell a completely different story about what it is that they delivered as value as a company. Instead of talking about here's this SaaS platform and here's how it integrates with your existing system and on about the benefits and details, he was able to put the purpose of what it is that the company did first. And this is what their marketing started to look like.
Hey Zoe, I have a question about my bonus.
Oh, you'll have to talk to Zoe and payroll about that. Oh, there you go, Lisa.
And I also wanted to know about adding my spouse to my benefits.
Well, that's a Zoe and benefits question.
Okay.
Sign these.
Thanks. And do you know anything about office plans? Mine isn't looking so good.
Let me see if I can grab Zoe and horticulture. Here you go.
Oh, and I also wanted to know...
Can you hold on that? Zoe and recruiting has a conference call. Thanks.
For HR people who do everything, we give you one place to go. Do it with Gusto.
That's what he cared about, was creating a fun, interesting experience for his audience that people loved and they wanted to see again and again. Now, this worked for Josh for three important reasons. One is that Josh is the kind of person who's very open to creativity and inspiration everywhere. That's why he could sit on his couch on a Saturday afternoon, watch a movie like Office Space, and understand what the true purpose of his company was really about. The second reason that this worked is because Josh understood that in order to be creative in the moments that you really, really need it, You have to practice creativity on a regular basis. It's no different than when you go to exercise a muscle. If you use a muscle really, really hard that you haven't used for months, maybe years, you really feel it. And it doesn't have that kind of performance that you'd like it to have. In order to get a strong creative muscle, we have to exercise that muscle. The third reason is that it worked for Josh is that he wanted to compete on a much broader scale than just the industry that he was in. If he said, I want to be as creative as ADP is, and he just looked at his competition, he wouldn't have ended up with something like Zoe. Instead, he said, what is it that is interesting to people? And what is it that makes them laugh and engage and share content? And that's what he used as his baseline for creativity. Now for Josh, this worked really well for him because he understood if you put your purpose before the product that you sell, you'll be able to draw on massive creativity. Now I want to tell you a little bit about where I learned this, because this is a man named Mohammed Hail Saeed, and Mohammed was a student at the University of Montreal, and he was studying marketing. And he looked at the experience that he had as a student, and he said, you know, what I do and what other students do, and the experience that they have as an outcome here, there's a huge range of what's going on. And he wanted to understand why some students who had the same teachers, the same curriculum, a lot of the same foundational things, some did really good in school, and some struggled continually. And he was talking to his teacher one day, and they said, you know, if we could help students instead of just having an education, but if we could transform that educational experience by transforming the learning experience, how it is that they go through the process of learning, I think that's something that would add incredible value to the educational system. So they started this company called Mentorina, Mohammed and his teacher and 2 other companies. And they looked at what is the experience that we can deliver, what's a story that we can tell. And he was excited every single day that he came to work. And I would ask Mohammed, I said, when you think about a company that really, really inspires you, that you talk about, that you want to emulate, who is that? And he said, well, it's Disney. And we talked about how Disney is so phenomenal at every single touch point along the way, how they're able to create that unified, seamless experience across the board. We had this plan that we put together. Mohammed went in to present it to the executive team, and the CFO said, there is no way in hell we're going to do this. We are a serious technology company. We're not doing things that involve princesses, goofy dogs, or mice with big ears. And he killed it. He said, we're going to go back and we're going to do what we know is traditional marketing, and that's how we're going to connect with people. And ever since that day, they have struggled to be heard above their competition that has a really, really strong hold in the market. So instead of every day coming to work and saying, what would Disney do for Mohammed? He's stuck in a pigeonhole doing things that he knows isn't the right thing to do, and he's creating a horrible experience, and their sales show it. So from this situation, I learned 3 really, really important things. The first is that fear is the biggest hurdle to creativity. And before we can become more creative and before we can start to bring new ideas and new inventions to the market, we have to look at what is it that holds us back from being open to these opportunities. And to do that, we have to make creativity in how we approach what it is that we do and how we create these experiences from a position that makes them feel safe, so we can start to take the risk out of them. Because it isn't that people don't want to change their behavior, it's that they don't want to take a risk because they don't know how to handle that fear. The second thing that we have to do is look at how can we take these small incremental steps, because it's the accumulation of all of these small steps that add up to huge, massive creativity. So it's something that we have to practice. We have to become habitually creative so that when we need it at a moment's notice, we've strengthened those muscles and we can actually do that. The third thing that we have to do is that we have to look at the process of creativity and put that in front of what it is that we're selling. We have to put the process over the product. Now this is what I learned from working with Mohammed and looking at what would great brands do. For Mohammed, what we talked about was if Disney created an educational learning management system, what would that look like? And that's a road we started down. But people got scared, and that's where it stopped. So he went back to a traditional, attention-deferring experience. Now here's the big secret that I want to share with you about creativity. It's all about one foundational thing, is that if you can just connect the dots for people, that's how you become more creative. Creativity at its very foundation is about connecting the dots. And I want to show you 4 examples of companies who've done this really, really well. We're not too far away from the Super Bowl, so if you look at using football as an inspiration for experiences, that's what happened to Allison. Allison is the customer experience manager for a company called Got Vmail. And every day when Allison came to work, she had a huge struggle on her hands because Got Vmail isn't exactly something that rolls off your tongue. It's not something that people naturally and immediately understand. So she spent a lot of her marketing budget and marketing time just explaining what the heck the company's name meant. They would buy these 30-second radio spots for drive time for people who worked in business, and they spent almost the whole 30 seconds just explaining what the company name meant. Her boss came to work one day after the Super Bowl, and he said, I've got a great idea. You know, this was the year that during the Super Bowl, Doritos had a contest, and they invited anybody to submit ads to show in the Super Bowl, and Doritos picked the winning one, and they gave the winner $1 million, and they showed it during the Super Bowl, and it went incredibly insane. Here's the video that won.
Everyone loves Doritos, right? Well, today I'm going to show you how to make your own. Okay, to save time, I've already gathered the ingredients. Now, of course, the hardest part about this is going to be finding a unicorn and then making it cry. If you guys are going to be making Cool Ranch, you want to go ahead and add 2 dashes of an Autumn Breeze and half a Horse's Whinny. And we are done. It's time for us to enjoy our delicious Dorito. I made gold again! What am I gonna do with all this gold?
So what Allison and her bosses understood is that it was the word of mouth that comes out of the Super Bowl and the ads. Because what do we talk about for weeks after the Super Bowl, other than this year and the score and the amazing game, are the ads. We talk about them for years. So what Allison and her bosses did when they rebranded the company from Got Vmail to Grasshopper, and they chose Grasshopper because grasshoppers are known for making big leaps. And what is it that entrepreneurs are known for? Making big leaps when it comes to risk. They rebranded the company as Grasshopper, and rebranding situations can cost a lot of money. And they looked at this and they said, well, let's take our inspiration from the Super Bowl, all the buzz that came out around it. And instead of just sitting there and talking about here's what our company does and get mired down in the detail of the products and services that they sell, they said, let's create something that's going to create buzz around what it is that we do. They picked out 5,000 influencers in the entrepreneur arena, and they sent them a direct mail package that looked like this. So on the outside it says, entrepreneurs change the world, join the movement. And inside this little package were 3 chocolate-covered grasshoppers. And if you ever show up at work one day and one of these is on your keyboard, you might want to think twice unless you want to get courageous with what it is that you eat. But this is a chocolate-covered grasshopper. So they also sent them to news anchors. They sent them to bloggers. And they had 8 mentions on the national news of this program. 4 news anchors ate them on air. They had insane word-of-mouth coverage. And Allison said, you know, you really hit it when you come to work and the phone rings and you answer it, and the person on the other end of the phone is from the National Security Advisor's office. They sent it to the White House, and they called her to say, what exactly did you send the White House? Chocolate-covered grasshoppers, are you sure? And so she got an opportunity to talk to the White House and explain how they're supporting entrepreneurs, the backbone of America, the people who built this country. That's how they took word-of-mouth marketing and exploded it. But it wasn't just a one-and-done kind of thing, because they used this same idea behind all of their campaigns that followed. There was one where they sent out a VHS tape to influencers, and it became sort of a rite of being recognized as a big influencer in the entrepreneur market, because people would blog about it. Who sends out a VHS tape in a digital world? And this reporter talked about how he had to track down a player and what it was like, and he spent an entire blog covering the creativity of Grasshopper, what they do for entrepreneurs, and said if you can get your hands on a VHS tape, you need to do it. And if you can't do that, you at least need to go check out Grasshopper, which is exactly what they wanted. So they were able to drive this tremendous buzz when they launched their content hub, which is all about how to help entrepreneurs be successful. They already had a huge audience because they had been capitalizing on all of that buzz around their content. Now for Allison, she said, we didn't want to focus on promoting the content because we wanted the content to be so rich, so entertaining, so engaging on its own that people wanted to share it. We did just enough so that people would know that it was there, and then we let the content speak for itself. with whether or not it was resonating with the message. Now for Allison, she was able to be massively creative because she was able to connect those dots between the buzz that came out from the Super Bowl and how people use word-of-mouth marketing and share ideas to the benefits of the product that they sold. She was able to connect those dots all the way through. And that's how Allison was able to look at an experience like a Super Bowl game and create a massively creative campaign out of it. Now the second example is HP. And if you ever think about marketing, a lot of things that we talk about is start with your customer. What is it that your customers want? But for HP, what they did is that they started in reverse. And this is Antonio Lucio. He's the global chief marketing officer for HP. And he joined the company just about 6 months before it split in two. And when he came to the company, every day he would come to work and he would see all of this memorabilia about the history of the company. And he knew the impact that it had on not just the technology market, but business in general around the world. And he said, you know, when I look at Hewlett and Packard, the founders, and the little garage where they started their company, I realized that what they did wasn't just to invent a technology, but they reinvented how we engaged with the world around us. And to do that, he said they had to understand what it was that they meant, that they stood for as a company. So having been around all these years, lots of companies have a diffused understanding of what it is the company stood for. So what Antonio did is that they took hundreds and thousands of interviews with employees. And they asked them, what is it that you love about the company? What is it they hate about the company that you would be happy if you never had to deal with or see again? And then what is it that you would love to create as an experience that this company drives forward? And he got all of that feedback, and that was the foundation for what they did for their vision. Their vision is about HP creates technology that makes life better for everyone everywhere. He divided it into 3 groups. What is the company? What is it that they do? HP creates technology. What does that technology do? It makes life better. And who does it serve? Everyone everywhere. From that, they took it into a mission where they engineer experiences that amaze. When they looked at the foundation of the company and what it is that they wanted to continue to do, it was all about engineering. They had a decision to make at this point. Were they a product company or were they an experiences company? And they said, we're an experiences company. We want everything that we do to be an amazing experience that builds a relationship with people. We don't want this to be about transactions and products. And the last thing he said is that we want to amaze the people who we serve. We don't want it to be something that go, yeah, I'm happy with that. They want to amaze people over and over and over again. So they use this as the foundation for their reinventing messaging. It's just about how do we help businesses be more successful. It's how do we reinvent what people expect from technology and how they interact with it. And this is the underlying message that they used in their marketing. And this is one of their ads that they use in Australia.
The challenge in the beauty of filmmaking is capturing what's in your imagination and bringing that to life on screen.
Growing up in Australia, we've always wanted to make films. Now through technology, we have the opportunity to reinvent the way we do things.
I think technology is also tied in with the fact that we can be really mobile. Jared and I can go out on the road with a tiny crew and still produce amazing work.
It makes it really easy to collaborate and gives a whole new perspective on the way we work.
When I'm travelling in a place like India, I have the ability to take snippets of video, location scout, and then easily send it back to Jared in Australia. We're right in the moment, still working together while overseas, and the immediacy of capturing that and sharing it through devices is incredible.
Not many people get to go to work each day with their best mate, work on things that they're really passionate about.
Yeah, and I guess it can't get much better than that.
Keep reinventing with the HP Spectre X2.
So they reinvented how they talked about the company because they didn't want to focus on the product. They wanted to focus on what it is that they could deliver for their customers. For Antonio, 65% of their media is digital. He said, for us to create an experience, we have to think about the emotion that we want to start with. Because if we can create that emotional bond with an audience, we know that that captures their heart, and then their head will follow after that. And that's the hardest thing for us to do, is to combine that heart with the head to help engage and create a meaningful experience for people. Now for Antonio, this worked, and it was massively creative because he was able to connect the dots between what's the mission of the company, what is it that they do, and what's the message that we have as marketing. But for him to do that, he had to start out by looking at things in reverse. Now when you think about some of the really boring B2B products, maybe one of the most boring are telecom routers. They're big boxes, they're millions of dollars, it's a really, really long sales cycle. And that's what Tim Washer had to do. Tim Washer is a creative director at Cisco, and his background is in stand-up comedy. So he's been a writer for Weekend Update for Saturday Night Live and Amy Poehler, and he's worked with Conan O'Brien, and he's worked with Bill Nye the Science Guy. And every day when Tim would come to work, he would draw in his background on comedy to work on this stuff for Cisco. And he said, why can't we be as fun and interesting as a company as Cisco as stand-up comedians are? There has to be a way that we can bring that together. And then one day he was listening to a stand-up comedy routine from Ray Romano, and he was at Carnegie Hall. And Tim said, I listened to his routine and I listened to the response from the crowd. And I realized what makes Ray Romano so successful as a comedian is that he builds a rapport with the audience. And when you build a rapport with humor, people put their walls down and they're willing to listen and laugh, because that's one of the most intimate connections that you have with somebody, is if you can make them laugh, because it bonds you together and directs you towards something on the outside. And Tim said, I believe that we can do that internally with Cisco with what we're wanting to do. We don't have to be stand-up comedians to do this, but if we can start with our intention is to build a rapport, to make people laugh, and to not start with the format that we're wanting to put content in, then we have an opportunity to build a different kind of relationship. So instead of the typical Cisco kind of marketing where they show a big box and start talking about all the features and benefits and specs and everything, this is what his marketing started to look like.
How many ways can a man tell his sweetheart, I love you? Until now, the answer was 3. He could buy her expensive diamonds. He could take her on a tropical vacation. Or he could carve his initials into a tree, then carve a heart, and then carve her initials. But now, he can give her the ultimate expression of his everlasting affection. The Cisco ASR 9000. Because nothing says forever like up to 6.4 terabits per second. Nothing says commitment like up to 400 Gbps per slot. And nothing says I love you like 6 times the mobile backhaul capacity. How many ways can a man say I love you? The answer is 4. The Cisco ASR 9000.
The salespeople loved this video because they showed it when they went to customer meetings. And it made people laugh and it made them relax and it built a rapport like they hadn't been able to do before. For Tim, he said it's not about what we're selling. It's about sharing an experience that's meaningful. And he said this is one of those things that if they looked at what can we measure and what's the ROI going to be and how do we turn this into leads and everything else like that, he said we would have missed this massive opportunity. Because one of the groups of people who saw this was analysts. And this caught analysts' attention. And they said, you need to check out Cisco because they're showing up differently. They're doing something differently. They were showing that they were very human. And if you're going to understand a customer problem, you have to show that you have empathy. And that's what Tim was able to do with this video. Now for Tim, he was able to be massively creative because he was able to connect those dots between his passion as a stand-up comedian and the format that he ultimately put content in. And that's how he was able to be massively creative. He started out drawing on his passion as a stand-up comedian. Now the last example I want to show is how you need to start to think about audiences instead of just customers. This is Ben Kaufman, and he's the president of a company called Quirky. And he has always been somebody who is quirky himself. He was an inventor at heart. He had invented things during high school, right out of high school. He convinced his parents, instead of taking that money that they'd set aside to put him through college, to fund one of his inventions. And the first thing that really got great attention was this little iPod case. And it's a protective case that has a keychain and a bottle opener. So you think about 18 to 22-year-old, that bottle opener probably comes in pretty handy. And he took it to Macworld, and it won the top prize that year. The next year, he went to Macworld, and he rented his booth space again. And he said, I'm not going to show a product this year. I want to give people an opportunity to share their ideas for what they think would be a great accessory for an iPod. He had tables set up. He had these clotheslines and pieces of paper and markers. And he said, all I want is for you guys to just share your ideas. What would be meaningful in your world? What would you love to see done? He spent the first 2 days, and people hung up their ideas. People gathered around the booth because they wanted to see what everybody else's ideas were. And at the end of the second day, he scanned them all. And the third day, he spent it prototyping what that next product would be. And people went insane because they were part of this process. It wasn't just him trying to sell something. He was listening to what it is that people cared about and what they loved. And he was taking it to that next step right in front of him. Some of these early inventions were the pivot power cord, which you can still buy today. Another one, which I'm not sure how modern society ever lived without, is the pig yolk, which is a little suction thing. It lets you suck the egg yolks out of your whites so you can keep them separated. These were the quirky things that people felt were important that he was helping bring to market. He started his website about quirky, and he created a community where people could subscribe and be part of the group who gives feedback to aspiring inventors about the projects that they have coming out and what they believe will be great go-to-market opportunities. This is where people could come and they could share their ideas. You can look at, I have a product idea, I want to contribute, I have a skill or expertise. So it wasn't just about, I have something to sell. It's about how do we build this community that supports and listens to each other and moves things forward. This was huge for him, and it was huge for companies like GE and Mattel. GE invested $30 million into Quirky because they said this is exactly the kind of thing that we want to know for our technology. We want to start to crowdsource ideas from people who are inventors at heart, not just inventors as a profession. Mattel came to them and they said, can we pay you to let us have access to your community so we can share ideas about toys that we're thinking might be good? Because before we spend all that money behind producing a toy and then launching it, we want to know if it's something that people will actually be interested in. For Ben, he was able to take that idea of invention and bringing people together as a community and sharing ideas and helping them become an inventor. But he was able to evolve that idea into something where he's the conduit. He's that connection point between the big companies who want ideas and the people who have fabulous ideas, who are passionate about it on the side. So for Ben, he was able to be massively creative because he was able to connect the dots between what he was hearing that people were saying and what he was actually doing as a company. So had he just stayed in his own little world, he would have kept putting out little iPod accessories or maybe other little things like that. It wouldn't have affected what it is that he was actually doing as a company. So this is what I want you to start to think about as you listen to people over the next 2 days, is how can you start to become massively creative? How can you be like Ben, and how can you start connecting the dots between what it is that you hear people talk about and what it is that you're actually doing? How can you be like Tim, and how can you connect the dots between whatever passion it is that you have on a personal basis in the format of the content, the format of the experiences that you actually create? How can you connect the dots, just like Antonio did, between what's the mission, what's the difference that you want to make in the lives of your customers, and what's the message that you're sharing as a marketer? And how can you be more like Allison, where you can connect the dots between the buzz, the things that people talk about the most, that word of mouth marketing, and what it is that you actually deliver as a benefit for your product? Because that's the only way that we'll be able to put the purpose of what we do over the products that we sell. And that's the only way that we'll be able to start addressing things like fear and getting over that fear and making it feel less risky. It's the only way that we'll be able to consistently take small steps so that they add up to big outcomes. And it's the only way that we'll be able to become habitually creative, because that's what it's going to take care of that brand transplant and to cure yourself of brand detachment disorder. Because at the end of the day, creativity is all about connecting the what? Connecting the dots. Excellent. Thank you.